Hey everybody, I'm Mike with Budget Guns and Gear Reviews, and this is The Right of the People, where we use the first to defend the second every Friday night at 7 p.m. Eastern. So uncover your keyboards and fire up your fingers. It's time to join the conversation.
Caught me playing around with something else. Try to put this poll in for the Moron of the Week. Hey everybody, I'm Mike. This is MK Outdoor Journal, and you are watching The Right of the People. It is Friday, October 15th, 2021. And as always, we got a lot to talk about tonight. But before we start doing that, I want to welcome my esteemed and illustrious panel to the show. So first off, we have the tactical sourpuss himself, he who was stuck behind enemy lines, the tactical pickle, Calaveras 32 Special. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing just fine, Budget. Appreciate the invite as always.
Well, you're always welcome, man. And then we got the one, the only, the not at work, the irascible and harassable Squibload. How are you, sir?
Doing really good. Thanks for the invite.
And then, last but most certainly not least, we have the guru of the gun tubes, the one who strikes at night, Night Strike One. How are you, sir?
I'm doing a lot better. A lot better.
A lot better. Well, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, I got something to take out to the backyard range. Captain Kirk went up into space. I'm pretty happy.
And came back down.
And he came back down too.
Alive.
My life is fulfilled for right now.
Alive. Let's not forget that. I mean,
Yeah,
there
alive,
was some
yes,
doubt given his age. He's like 90 something.
Right. Right. He's 90, but still, he looks pretty good for 90.
And he's definitely gone where I haven't gone before. So
Exactly.
good for him.
So.
Out there in the chat, we got Kingpin out there. How you doing? Gun Lover Grandpa, how's it going, Buck? New York Outcast in the house. EDC Texan, how are you, sir? Good to see you. Warsaw Patriot is in the house. Anybody out there that I have missed, sound off in the chat. Say hi. I'll say hi back. This is a conversation. This is not me talking to you and the panel talking to you. This is us talking with you, and that is a very important distinction. I enjoy the conversation aspect of this. I want it to be back and forth. I don't care if you disagree with me. That's awesome. Feel free to disagree. Just keep your comments civil, keep them family friendly. Disagreement is and discussion is how we examine our own ideas and make sure that they're valid. We test the validity and maybe we learn something that way. Being a knucklehead ain't. And my mods, and if not my mods, I will certainly take care of you if you want to be a knucklehead. Small Caliber Arms Review is out there. How you doing, neighbor? So, you guys know that last week there was this school shooting in Texas where this kid came to school and shot several people. There seems to be some discussion that this kid was terribly bullied by some of the kids that he shot. I did see a video of the shooter getting the ever-loving snot beat out of him by one of the kids earlier that day. So they're saying that this kid got robbed and all that. Now before I continue any further, let me say that none of that justifies what he did. You don't handle the issue by taking a gun to school and cracking off rounds at people. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying it's justified. I'm not saying screw them, they deserve it. I'm not saying any of that. But I do have to wonder if those things don't play a significant factor in the creation of these incidents. specifically speaking about the schools themselves, whether or not they play a large part in it. I can tell you from experience with my kids that schools are loath to actually handle something when one kid is bullying another. And then if the kid that's being bullied stands up for themselves and does something, they're the ones that get in trouble. I've seen it time and again. I've seen it with my kids. There was a point when I was down at the middle school locally so much and so opinionatedly that apparently they were ready to call the cops every time they saw me pull in the parking lot, because my kids were getting bullied and bullied and bullied, and being the good children that they were, they didn't do anything until one day, well, they had enough, and well, my daughter ended up dumping milk over a girl's head and then hitting her, but that's another story. But anyhow, I was constantly there, and the school did nothing about it, did nothing to the bullies, did absolutely nothing to deal with it. So I could kind of empathize with that situation, because schools, generally speaking, don't do shit to the bullies. There's a piece from bearingarms.com. Says, "Are schools to blame for armed students?" From October 14, 2021 by Tom Knighton. The shooting in Arlington, Texas has been the subject of some discussion here at Bearing Arms, and understandably so. A shooting at a school is real news, even if some don't seem to think so. Our schools matter, and so we're going to listen when something happens in one of them. In the case of Arlington, the shooter was reportedly the victim of bullying. It was apparently so bad that he felt his only avenue was to bring a gun to school and to shoot those who tormented him. Now, that's not a good reason to use a gun. I've dealt with bullying myself back in the day, so while I understand the temptation, I also understand that it's not the correct response. Whooping the bullies' butts? Perfectly acceptable. Shooting people? Not so much. Yet over on the Federalist, they raise a good point about our schools. And this is quoting from the Federalist. As with other shootings, gun control advocates have used this tragedy as an occasion to call for more laws against gun ownership. However, considering that the shooter broke the law by possessing a firearm in the first place, it's difficult to see how making more gun control laws would make a difference. Instead of guns, what merits more attention in this matter is the issue of bullying, which seems to be an ongoing problem in large public schools. In various forms and places online and at the school, students are not getting along, and many are being victimized by unhappy kids. Before considering what schools are doing or not doing to combat bullying, it should be said from the outset that parents have the biggest responsibility to teach their children how to confront bullies and how not to become bullies themselves. At the very least, this means not excusing their misbehavior and not throwing them homecoming parties while their child's victims are still in the ICU, as the shooter's parents did. Less discipline, less learning. For their part, educators need to do more with discipline. Besides offering scripted advisory lessons on bullying and depression, many school leaders have wrongly addressed bullying by relaxing standards on all fronts to relieve pressure on supposedly overburdened students. Students who misbehave are often no longer suspended or given detention, but are given a warning and sent back to class. Moreover, many of those classes include long stretches of free time, and academic expectations are incredibly low, meaning failure is virtually impossible. District leaders benefit enormously by reducing the number of suspensions, expulsions, and failures, and have fewer struggling students to remediate and reform. By changing the standards, their job becomes much easier, and they look strong and effective in the process. Unfortunately, this loosening approach has made so many otherwise decent public schools dangerous and chaotic. Bullying and rowdiness have become more commonplace, similar to Philadelphia schools after their school leaders banned suspensions. Going back to the article here on Bearing Arms, the author, Auguste Marat, is an English teacher in the Dallas area, so he probably has a pretty good inkling of what's taking place. From what I know about bullying, too much free time is a factor. Look, bullies are going to bully. Educators can only do so much to combat that, no matter how much they try. You can teach a kid that bullying is bad, but is that really going to change their behavior? Probably not, at least in many cases. So what you can do is try to minimize the opportunity for bullying. Free time in class actually makes it easier for the bullies to find opportunities to harass their targets. If they're busy working, or at least trying to look like they're working, then they can't harass their victims. Marat has had more to say, and I urge you to read what he wrote because, frankly, I think he's right. When my eldest was in public school, he got picked on. At one school, I told the vice principal that they'd either do something about it or I'd have to take my son I'd have my son take care of it. From then on, he had a shadow at that school. Other schools? Not so much. In middle school, it became clear that he had no alternative, so I told him to defend himself. He did, and that ended the kid's bullying attempts. Others tried until one day he ended up in a fight where teachers had to pull him off the other kid. He was never messed with again. Teachers, despite the fact that some may want to do something, can only do so much. There will be opportunities for students to bully others. It's up to the school to both minimize this and to try and get involved when it happens. Failure to do so results in bad things. Yes, those bad things may include a student bringing a gun to school because they honestly don't know what else to do. There's no excuse to do so, especially when you intend to shoot 4 people, but the schools aren't absolved of responsibility for letting a situation get to that point. It's not even the teachers either, but the administrators who shoulder the blame. It's time parents stepped up and demanded better. Before I go on with any further with what I think, do you guys have any thoughts on the issue?
Yeah, as someone who experienced that, growing up until I did, put my fist in someone's face, it was, you get bullied, you report it to the office pulls the bully in, then the bully's parents come in and raise unholy hell. Then the administration decides it's easier to let the quiet kids live in their own quiet hell than it is to deal with an unruly parent. So basically, it's a self-fulfilling cycle that eventually the quiet kid is going to snap and going to lash out one way or another because the schools flat out refuse to do anything. And then, of course, the kid defending themselves is now all of a sudden the bad guy and the bully's the victim. So that's where they are making their own problems by lack of these schools wanting to do freaking anything. So that's where I don't condone this kid bringing a firearm to school by any means, but that's where when you have school districts that refuse to do anything, and that's where just telling them bully's bad, okay, doesn't do a damn thing. Suspension, expulsion, detention. Often these kids don't care because they're end up being bullies because they learn the exact same attitude from their parents. So unless you're gonna crack down hard and have it affect all levels, I don't think it's gonna change anytime soon.
Do you other gentlemen have any opinion on this?
Not really.
Well, I'm going to have to say that I do think the schools play a part in this. I think that schools are a bureaucracy, and bureaucracies have a sad tendency to absolutely ignore problems until they can't anymore.
That's where, I was just thinking about, Parkland. That's where, if I remember correctly, before that shooting, that school and then the local municipality had taken a stance where they were downgrading all of the, or at least a lot of the problems on campus, artificially downgrading to make it look like the problems were reducing, because then they got a higher federal grant or something like that. So I think that would definitely play into your bureaucracy statement.
Yeah, and I said I watched a video of this kid getting bullied and getting punched on and getting the stuffing wailed out of him, and that's exactly what happened. The kid that was doing it, I mean, to me, it was obvious this wasn't the first time he'd done something like that. And what kept coming through my head is, why aren't the teachers doing something about this? Yeah, maybe I think it was a female teacher, and maybe she felt too scared to intervene. She kept yelling for help, for somebody come help, somebody come help, somebody come help. Well, why didn't anybody come help? This is a couple minutes of this kid just straight getting beat on, and he's curled up, in a ball, trying to keep the aggressor in that incident from beating the ever-loving crap out of him and failing miserably. He was picked up and slammed down and punched on and kicked on, and just it was horrible to see. So, given that the kid that did this felt that comfortable doing it, I'm going to go out on a limb and say he's done shit like that before and gotten away with it. And that, I think, is the problem. Because the bullies and the people that cause all the ruckus in the schools, they don't do it just once out of the blue. That shit is a pattern of behavior that has been going on over and over and over and over and over all throughout their school career. So that tells me that they've been allowed to get away with it because schools are too afraid to do anything. They can't put their hands on somebody to break up a fight like that because, they'll get sued. We have to have these lower standards to keep the kids in the school instead of weeding out the ones that are just absolute, as Rocall would say, shit bags. You know what? The technology exists now. Kick their ass out of school and make them do it from home. That can happen. That keeps the kids that actually want to come to school, that want to learn, able to have that opportunity, and lets the shitbags go do what shitbags do.
Mike, I want to address an angle that maybe nobody's talking about.
Sure.
This little pussy that went to school with the gun, does he have a dad or what?
Don't know.
Okay, where was the dad teaching him how to defend himself? Where was he? And if there wasn't a dad in the picture, it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't need a dad. It's helpful. It's a good idea. That's why a two-parent household is a good thing, despite what some people might believe. A two-parent, I'm not even going to go down that. Anyhow, bullies only understand one thing: force. You repel their violence with force. You get hit, you get beat up, you get your books knocked out of your hands, you get this done, that done. Eventually, you need to man up, turn around, and fight back. I understand the schools won't help. I was the new kid at a lot of schools. We moved around a lot, and as a new kid, everybody wants to take a shot at me. And when some of these kids took a shot at me, they found out the hard way. You don't want to mess with me. And I mean, I really don't like saying this, but I guess I'll say it. My dad wasn't there. When I needed my dad to teach me how to fight, he wasn't there. So I had to figure it out on my own. And you might say, well, this kid's not you. I don't care. I judge everybody. I benchmark off of me. If I can do it, you can do it. I never brought a gun to school. And even though we didn't have guns growing up in my house, the last time I moved right down the street from a relative who had a house full of guns. I could have very easily gotten a gun and ammunition and done something unthinkable. It never occurred to me to do that. But here's the difference. Back then, when two kids fought, they'd get dragged into the principal or the vice principal's office. All right, who started it? They'd intimidate the kids until the kid who started it fessed up. That kid would get sent home for 3 days. The other kid would be told, and they might get an ice pack for the bloody nose, otherwise go back to class. Nowadays, these pussies that run the school don't do that. Oh, we can't because then we're encouraging violence. That's the only thing these bullies understand. And the thing that always bothered me about when kids would want to bully me, the two things. One was the fact that the school never really wanted to get involved, like what Calaveras was talking about. They just didn't. And that whenever the parents of the other kids came in, they had every excuse. Every excuse. Oh no, my son would have never done that. And back then we didn't have cameras in the school, and everybody didn't have an iPhone and posting stuff on the social media and stuff. But it's like, I can drag 15 witnesses in here to say that this kid attacked me in the hallway. Doesn't matter. Didn't happen. And it drove me nuts. I raised my kids to defend themselves. If you get attacked at school, you defend yourself. Don't worry about what their stupid ass policy is. Dad will back you up. But don't you ever be a bully, because if you do, you're going to catch hell from me. And my kids have not been bullies. They're totally capable of doing it. My older son had to defend himself. I do not understand these parents who raise their children to be bullies. I don't get it. Where is the mentality there? But here's the last thing, and this is probably going to be the most unpopular thing I have to say about it. Getting bullied builds character. Getting bullied makes you tougher. It makes you stronger. There are people out there that are my age that have never been in a fist fight in their life. I think they're at a loss. Because when it comes time to defend themselves, they think because they're carrying a gun, they'll be able to do it. Dude, if they ain't got what it takes to hit somebody in the face, they ain't got what it takes to pull the trigger. So they can fool themselves all they want because they've got a card and a piece of hardware on them, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the moment of truth, you will actually defend yourself. I'm not saying everybody needs to get in a fight either, but it builds character. And this whole, oh, my feelings, to hell with your feelings. My feelings were hurt. It made me sad and depressed and all these other things when I was a kid. And kids are trying to figure out who they are in the world. They're trying to, fit in and everything else and be the new kid. It sucked. But it made me stronger for when I was an adult. And if I had to do it all over again, I probably would. I just would have hit back a lot sooner. The first time I hit a bully back, it changed everything. And that's when I realized this is what I have to do. And I'm still not afraid this day to do it. Now, I am worried about lawsuits. But other than that, I just don't see, I'm not saying they should encourage bullying, but I just don't see why they can't have some sort of policy where if you defend yourself, and it can be proven there's witnesses or something, or both of you are no worse for wear, then you don't get in any trouble. And I'm certainly not going to get kicked in the ribs because I'm worried about being suspended. That's what I told my kids. Don't worry about getting suspended. Don't worry about getting expelled. Don't worry about any of that. You do what you have to do. Where are the parents? What is wrong with the schools? And the first time the news glorified one of these kids going into the school, shooting a school, and it happened a lot. It's happened, if you Google it, it's happened throughout the entire history of this country. Just the news wasn't a mainstream, wasn't the 24-hour news cycle. When we got into our modern news cycle, they started glorifying this. All that did was inspire more kids. So even the media bears some responsibility for this. So I see all kinds of angles on this that I don't think people want to talk about. Instead, they just want to talk about their feelings.
Well, I think...
And that's where... with some of these teachers, some of these parents, Squib, they are telling their kids the same thing that you're basically telling your kids. That's what I grew up with. It was the, damn well better not start a fight because otherwise you'll get your ass whipped when you get home. But that's where if attacked, if they suspend you for, if they were to suspend me for fighting, my parents would take me out for fucking ice cream. Sorry, for dang ice cream. After after they picked me up and ripped the principal verbally a new a-hole. But that's where it was one of those. I knew I wasn't supposed to be fighting. That's where I tried to avoid it as much as I could. That I wasn't quick to throw a punch. That's where there may have been some of that going on. But yeah, when the kid's in the fetal position trying to protect his head and ribs, as he's getting wailed on, that's definitely someone that, I would say definitely has a case for, I don't care if, of course, the rule in a fist fight is if you're the one left standing at the end, that's where, in a situation like that, the person that's coming at you obviously has no qualms about putting you in the ICU or worse. So, soft spots are perfectly acceptable.
Well, I think the biggest, not the biggest, but one of the huge problems I see with the way that the schools handle this stuff is they discourage self-defense. They don't allow it. If you throw, like they mentioned out in the chat, you throw one punch in self-defense, that's it. You're in the same trouble as the bully is. And that's some bullshit. If you
It doesn't teach the kids anything.
No.
It doesn't teach the kids a thing.
Yes, it does.
When
Yes, it does. It teaches them that it's not worth it to defend themselves.
Well, maybe, and maybe that's their hidden agenda. But when my older son got in that fight, the kid came at him from behind and sucker punched him, and my kid laid him out.
Good.
And they suspended both kids for 10 days. They said they would give them their assignments. They didn't. So the kids both missed 10 days worth of schoolwork. I went in there and talked to the vice principal, and I said, why don't you have me and his dad have a conversation, and then let's drag our sons in here, and let's have them shake hands like men, and put it behind them. Because men can do that. We can punch each other in the face, and the next day go to work. We can punch each other in the face, and the next day have a beer.
Yep.
It's a different kind of thing. And, of course, the liberal female vice principal said, oh, no, I don't think that's a good idea. I see where you're coming from, but you know what? Put him on speakerphone right now. Call this kid's dad. Let me talk. I don't even have to be in the room with him. Let me talk to him. I bet you this guy would have said, hell yeah, I don't want my kid missing school for 10 days. I'll talk to my son. You talk to your son. And then they learn a valuable lesson. Yeah. How to forgive and forget and to move on. And sometimes people you fight now are your friends later.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I'm actually good friends. I'm good friends with a kid that he's a man my age, but with a guy that I got into a fight with three times when we were kids, and we say hi all the time and talk to each other. So yeah, you're right. Men have the ability to do that, but I also think that's men who are raised by men.
Yep.
Not men who are raised by the school. Because it's just, I don't know. I think there's a lot of the problem is that schools aren't there just to teach you the 3 R's. They're not there to teach you reading, writing, and arithmetic. They're there to teach you some other things too. Unfortunately, I think they're there to teach you some things that aren't good, like don't defend yourself, be passive, let somebody else take care of you, because nobody else will. That's the unfortunate part. Is that where the mentality of the people who say, what would you do if somebody was robbing you and they had a gun pointed at you and they said they were going to kill you, and they say, well, then I guess it's just my time. Is that where that mentality comes from? Maybe. Because it sure seems to me that the education system is set up, and not, again, let me say this, give this caveat that I don't think it comes from the rank and file teachers themselves. It comes from somewhere else, somewhere higher up the food chain, that they're there to teach you to be passive as part of passive independent, because, well, that's what our political masters want, but not to drift off into tinfoil hat land any farther than I already have. But I think that schools do play a big part in creating these school shooters based on their inaction, based on their neglect, based on their unwillingness to deal with the problem early on and nip it in the bud. This shit should have started in elementary school. When the bullies misbehave, you crack their ass with a paddle and move on.
Well, that's also part of what one of the points I made about it. That's where, maybe back when you guys were in school, that's where, the principals could crack you with the paddle, and that's where if the parents raised too much of a stink about it, the parents might get the paddle as well. Versus like when I was in school, that's where there was a couple kids that were the primary problems, and that's where their parents were that same bully, that's where throw their weight around if the principal didn't cower before them, likely to knock the principal's teeth in type. And those were the kids that the school never would do anything about, because if they did, then they had to deal with the parent who had the same mentality. So that may also be a part of it.
I went to the school many times and showed my ass, both the middle school and the high school, with my daughters to fight their battles for them, because the school sure as shit wouldn't. And like I said, it got to the point where they were going to call the fucking police on me every time I went, because I definitely let my opinion be heard and gave them hell about it. But they sure as shit didn't do nothing to help my kids. They're worthless.
And I don't think that they should have something where the kids get charged with assault unless it's like this kid. Here's the thing: when we would fight, whoever hit the floor first, whoever, like what Calaveras was saying, whoever's left standing won. If you hit the floor or you cried uncle or whatever, that was it. It was over. Not this. You're on the floor, you're in the fetal position, and they're still beating the crap. At that point, it's assault. Now maybe there should be criminal charges. If kids throw a couple punches and maybe get knocked down and this, that, and the other, and minor stuff, bloody nose, busted lip, a black eye, stuff like that. There's an opportunity there for the kids to find a way to get past it and get over it and apologize, and or not, because that'll make you weak. But just find a way to do something. But when it gets to a certain point where, yeah, this kid was actually in fear of his life, not in fear of a bloody lip, at that point, then, yeah, it's just, the more you involve the government, if you get the cops in there every time now you've got a mess there, and then now, we'll sue the school, we'll sue the teacher that failed to do something just to. I've been in fights where I was yelling for help and the teacher was within arm's length and they just stood there and watched, right? And didn't do anything, right? I know what that feels like. This is the person that you're supposed to look up to and respect, and and they're just looking at you going, what do you want me to do? Kind of. Meanwhile, you're getting your ass beat, and then that's when you say, screw it. Nobody's going to stand up for me. I'll stand up for myself. But still, if we said, oh, well, we can sue the teachers, you're not going to end up suing the teachers. You'll end up suing the school district, which just affects the taxpayers. Or the union will protect their job, or they'll get moved somewhere else. Or there's no one right answer other than better parenting or better values.
Well, that's a component of it as well, is to have values that would prevent your kids from, bullying other kids. Teach them things that it's not right to pick on someone smaller than you, weaker than you. It's the right thing to do is to protect the people that are smaller and weaker than you, not try to take advantage of them. But unfortunately, we live in a society where it seems like being the predator is what's societally rewarded, as opposed, and very, very much being the sheepdog is, well, punished. Even when it's being the sheepdog for yourself, or maybe especially when it's being the sheepdog for yourself. But I think that it is a complex issue, and I don't think there's any one answer. I think that the whole question of mass shootings, whether they be at schools or not, isn't something that's going to be solved by a simple maneuver, as they have found out in Europe. Because there was recently a mass shooting in Norway, which is heavily gun controlled as compared to the U.S. But they didn't use a gun. This is from CBC, from the AP, posted October 13th. 5 killed, 2 injured by man armed with bow and arrows in Norway, police say. A man armed with a bow fired arrows at shoppers in a small Norwegian town Wednesday, killing 5 people before he was arrested, authorities said. The police chief in the town of Kongsberg said there was a confrontation between officers and the assailant, but he did not elaborate. 2 other people were wounded and hospitalized in intensive care, including an officer who was off duty and inside the shop where the attack took place, police said. The man who carried out the act has been arrested by the police, and there is no active search for more people, said Police Chief. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that. Based on the information we have, there is one person behind this. According to police, the suspect walked around downtown Kongsberg shooting arrows. Aas, who is the police chief, declined to comment on reports that the man used a crossbow, saying only that there were several crime scenes. Newspaper VG showed images of an arrow that appeared to be stuck in the wall of a wood-paneled building. Acting Prime Minister Erna Solberg described the attack as gruesome and said it was too early to speculate on the man's motive. The reports coming from Kongsberg tonight are horrifying, Solberg told a news conference. I understand that many people are afraid, but it's important to emphasize that the police are now in control. Prime Minister-designate Jonas Gahr Støre, who is expected to take office Thursday, called the assault a cruel and brutal act in comments to Norwegian news agency NTB. Haas told reporters that police were investigating whether weapons apart from the bow and arrows had also been used. The attacks took place over a large area of Kongsberg, a municipality of around 28,000 people in southeastern Norway, police said. Haas earlier said police would investigate to determine if the attack amounted to an act of terrorism. The suspect has not yet been questioned. Police were alerted to the attack around 6:30 p.m. local time and arrested the suspect about 20 minutes later. Kongsberg is about 68 kilometers west of Norway's capital, Oslo. Following the attacks, the police directorate said it had immediately ordered officers nationwide to carry firearms. Norwegian police are normally unarmed, but officers have access to guns and rifles when needed. This is an extra precaution. The police have no indication so far that there is a change in the national threat level, the directorate said in a statement. City officials invited people who were affected by the attack and their relatives to gather for support at a local hotel. The attack comes more than a decade after right-wing extremist Anders Behring Breivik set off a bomb in Oslo's government district and carried out a shooting massacre at the summer camp of the left-wing Labour Party's youth organization on Utoya Island. The violent attack on July 22, 2011, killed 77 people and stunned Norway. Breivik was sentenced to 21 years in prison, the maximum under Norwegian law, but his term can be extended as long as he's considered a danger to society. What the hell that had to do with the case at hand is beyond me, but so there you have it. Scumbags are going to find a way to scumbag no matter what you tell them they can't have. You know, the fact is, randomly killing folks is pretty much illegal everywhere. But to paraphrase Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park, scum will find a way. You guys have any thoughts on this incident?
You think they're going to call for a ban on bows and crossbows in Norway now?
It'll be interesting to see if they do. It wouldn't surprise me.
Well, not just Norway. That's where, that's where England, has heavily restricted, any sharp knives ever since there was a few stabbings. So that's where the fact that there was a
even
bow attack
knives
in Norway. Yeah, that's right. I bet a bow attack in Norway is going to kickstart a lot of other countries that have either currently have strict laws or have been trying to enact strict laws to try something to expand the bans and the restrictions to more than just what they currently are.
And just think, that's the land of the Vikings right there. Go ahead.
If you haven't heard that, bows have already been banned up in Canada. That's a thing up there. Is crossbows are actually a thing that actually are banned up there. So it wouldn't surprise me if they try to go the next step up doing it.
Yeah, that's the sad thing, that there's such passivity in the land that brought us such wonderful things as the blood eagle, right? For those that don't know what the blood eagle is, look it up. It's rather gruesome. Vikings used to do it. And Vikings came from Norway.
The Vikings can get a bit gnarly when they wanted to.
But now, the max you can give someone is 21 years in prison, no matter what they do. What a friggin' joke. Cops don't carry guns. Maybe they should carry bows.
What's next? Stuffed animal?
Yeah.
Well, that's where, it may not be the most popular opinion here, but that's like the cops not carrying guns. Like, well, if the citizens aren't allowed to own them and carry them, that's where, law enforcement and, the bodyguards of all of the, elected officials shouldn't be allowed to have them either.
Nope,
so,
shouldn't.
One or the other, either everybody or nobody. And my vote is everybody.
EDC Texans, as an archer, what the hell are cops doing? New York Outcast is like crazy how the guys kept killing after the police showed up. They had to get special permission to be armed and still give the guy a warning shot 30 minutes later. So the gun saved the day in the end. Wow. A bad guy with a bow was stopped by a good guy with a gun. Say it isn't so.
Yeah. All that had to happen first. That's what happens when you let liberals take over.
Yeah, and that's exactly the problem. Speaking of what happens when you let liberals take over, remember last year in 2020 how there was this entire defund the police movement? How many municipalities took a great deal of their police department's funding away. Consequently, a lot less cops on the street, a lot more crime. The cops are doing less because they don't have the manpower to do it. And in a lot of places, a bunch of cops quit. And they couldn't hire any more because they didn't have adequate staffing levels. Well, surprise, surprise, surprise. Crime skyrocketed. And now, maybe, they're seeing the light. Because this piece from Breitbart says many cities that defunded police quietly restored funding. Many cities that cut police department funding during the height of anti-police activism in 2020 are quietly restoring the funds and, in some cases, handing out bonuses to keep officers on the payroll. The New York Times reports an additional $200 million has been allocated to the New York Police Department and a 3% boost given to the Los Angeles force. Moreover, Austin, Texas, which cut police funding in the late summer of 2020, has restored funding and then some. On August 13, 2020, the Texas Tribune noted that the Austin City Council voted to cut police funding by $150 million. Governor Greg Abbott reacted to the cuts by saying Austin's decision puts the brave men and women of the Austin Police Department and their families at greater risk and paves the way for lawlessness. Public safety is job one, and Austin has abandoned that duty. The New York Times points out Austin has now raised the police budget to new heights. The paper also notes Burlington, Vermont has gone from cutting the police budget to handing out $10,000 bonuses to keep officers from leaving the force. And in Dallas, Mayor Eric Johnson wants to do two things. One, restore police funding. Two, add more officers to the department. The New York Times noted, after the mayor proposed increasing funding, no protests followed. When the council backed a budget that restored many of the cuts made last year, few came to the public hearing and even fewer spoke against the plan, which included the hiring of 250 officers. Now, I'm going to let you guys speak your piece before I say what I think is really going on. You guys have any thoughts on this issue? First they cut the police, now they're funding them again?
Well, that's true with places like Chad's Shop and this kind of stuff. Some of them realized it was a bad idea. I'm hearing reports come out of Portland and Seattle both, where they've got a bunch of vacancies. They're holding job fairs and everything, trying to hire them, and they're getting no applicants. Even if you're willing to, even if they're willing to give, pay you twice as much and everything else, how many people are going to want to sign up for a law enforcement agency that for a fact, even if you do your job to the letter of the law, someone's going to sue you for doing it, and the city council is going to throw you under the bus faster than you can blink to save their own backside. Who's going to want to work for a department like that? And that's nationwide. Every department is having to deal with that.
Go ahead. Do you guys want to say something? Go ahead.
Yeah,
I'll wait till last.
I'll agree with Roll Call on this. It's definitely the trust and morale now. It's it's basically broken now at this point because you basically toss people under the bus and now you don't want them, but now you're begging them and paying them to be coming back in. So at this point, it's like you can't trust the police department if they're going to basically shove you under the bus.
Squib, do you have any thoughts?
I'll complain about the bad cops that are out there because they get more attention than the good cops. And I'll complain that the good cops don't do enough to clean up their own house, and then they whine and complain that the public doesn't like them. I think that they could use something like funding the police as a reason to finally weed out the bad cops. And then when they start refunding the police, I think the better cops, the good cops, the ones that should be setting the example for everybody else, should get better pay, should get bonuses, should have some protection. I think cops in general are underpaid, all across the board. I think that, but I don't want to reward bad behavior either. So I was kind of thinking that some of this defunding would come back to bite them, but I also thought it might help them clean house. And I don't even know that it's done that.
Problem with the using it to clean house is so much of the typical union stuff. It's the last in, first out. So you don't get to pick and choose the good cops to get to keep and the bad cops to get rid of. Is you're having it's seniority based. So you're losing good cops as well as you're getting rid of bad cops. And unfortunately, when you've got departments that won't back you up, there isn't really any good way to get rid of specific cops that are causing problems.
Then maybe they shouldn't allow them to be unionized. Could you imagine if the military was unionized? I'm going to file a grievance.
Here's what I think, and I'm about to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole, so just bear with me. I could be wrong, but it's an angle that I don't think anybody's thinking of right now. I'm going to first start by asking a question. What happened in 2020?
Riots.
What else?
Injustice,
sure. What's possibly the most important thing to happen in 2020?
More firearm ownership.
It's almost a year.
Oh, the election.
Bingo. We had a presidential election. Now, you're right.
With the, I was going to say, with the firearm ownership and this kind of stuff, I think that plays, the increased firearm ownership, I think, is a symptom. That's for during the whole COVID thing and after with the defund of the police and everything else, a lot of people came to realize that, hey, I live in a community. They used to be like, hey, I live in a community. So bad things happen. Someone's going to respond. Someone else is going to take care of the problem. They very quickly figured out that all the government systems they thought were going to take care of them aren't. And I think there may be some of that, coming back to roost now where, just people are less likely to be reliant.
Well,
and they're trying to force more reliance.
Here's the thing. We had this election last year. You're right. We did have all this chaos, all this confusion, all these riots, all the violence, all the burning, all the looting, all the killing, everything. And during all of that, instead of ramping up law enforcement aid efforts, instead of giving more funding to the police so that they could handle these things, these Democrat-controlled municipalities cut police funding and made the problem worse. Now, I have to wonder if that wasn't absolutely, positively deliberate so that they could create more chaos, more confusion, more violence, more unrest, more upset, more dissatisfaction with an incumbent during a election so that they could get their guy elected. And now that their guy's elected, they're quietly, because this isn't being publicized, they're quietly putting the money back in there to police to get back control so that things can now calm down and they can show how well run the country is now that the Democrats are in charge. Just something to think about.
That's where
I'll give some thoughts.
Tyrants throughout history have used chaos as a tool in order to in order to gain their power to the point where they can then cement it after and get things to calm down. That's where, pretty much every tyrant in history has done that, whether it be a war, civil unrest, or whatever else. I think that, budget may be onto something there.
Calaveras, are we talking like as far as like Adolf Hitler, or we're talking like Mao Zedong, people like that?
Yes, and then even farther back in history than that.
I'll give your theory some plausibility, Budget, but in the end, they just committed fraud, and the opposing party helped them do it. So creating the chaos and then taking credit for solving the chaos might be a good PR move, and it might have been what they thought they had to do. But in the end, they went with their
no, I think you're right. I think you're right.
Last ditch effort and solution. So
I think you're absolutely right, but I suspect that what I laid out was the strategy. It just didn't work. So they went ahead and did it the old-fashioned way and outright cheated with the 3 a.m. pause and vote counting.
And see, there are people that won't open their eyes and say, I didn't look at it that way. From a certain point of view, that's entirely possible. Why am I voting for these people? Why am I voting for the people that create a situation that made me fear for my family's safety? Why am I? But in general, I don't think too many people do that. Same thing over again.
I'm sorry, everyone, but Squibload has been attacked by robots and may or may not be able to continue.
May I have permission to speak, sir?
Yeah, go ahead.
Now, until Squib gets back in here, as far as elections go, I think the biggest issue we're facing is anything with electronic can be hackable and it can be changeable. So if you can do that through an election, what did actually change with our elections? Was it, like, what year did it actually kick it off, actually, from doing live streaming electronic from paper? Because I remember back then we used to do everything by paper. We didn't do it by electronics, did we?
No, mostly it was all paper, yeah.
So what year did that change actually happen?
I'm not
Because
sure.
last time I checked, I'm trying to recall what year that was.
I remember the Bush-Gore hanging chads in Florida.
Maybe somebody in the side chat might tell me like what year actually changed that from paper to electronic.
I know where I live, we still used, at least where I vote,
We still use paper.
we still use paper, and then we feed it into an electronic machine. You remember those old standardized tests where you fill in the circle on the paper, and then it gets electronically graded? That's basically what we do. Guy that comments says Squibload invented Squib Game, by the way.
No, but Squib, do you have any idea what year that changed from the transition from paper to electronic?
It hasn't. It's still paper.
Are you telling me that we've been relying too much on electronics, though?
No, electronics are one of those things. It's a good thing. It's a bad thing. It's how you use it. It's just like a firearm. It's a good thing. It's a bad thing. It's how it gets used.
Here's the thing on paper, though. If you count every single paper, you cannot cheat. The only way you're going to cheat
Listen,
It didn't matter if they did it electronically or with paper. They had so many things. Yeah.
Joseph Stalin was absolutely right when he said it doesn't matter how the people vote. It matters who counts the votes.
Precisely. So whether they did it with electronics, paper, a combination of both, all the mail-in ballots, which shouldn't have been allowed under federal law other than absentees, which not necessarily counted unless the election is close. That's already been in place. And the voter ID stuff, letting people vote in two places, letting dead people vote, throwing out ballots, finding ballots all over the place that, we're going to do a recount and we can't find all the ballots, shutting down the polling area for 4 hours, kicking everybody with a camera out, kicking everybody out who's there to confirm that the voting process is done, and then 4 hours later reopen it, and what do you know, it's flip-flopped big time. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that they used all kinds of different ways to commit the fraud, whether they were jamming a piece of paper in a machine over and over again to make it count the number of times they wanted, or whatever. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, that's what happened. But there are people that were saying that, and who at the end of last year and the beginning of this year, who have now changed their tune, and they're going, well, no, they've proven that there was no fraud. And it's like, dude, what? Did you just swallow the Flavor Aid too?
Yes.
But that's really, I don't know that was their first intention, because they might not have thought that the Republicans were going to be on board with it, and trying to create a situation where people had no faith in the administration, a vote of no confidence. Yeah. But for somebody to say, yeah, he won the election because Trump failed to make people feel safe, no. He won the election through cheating.
Well, I think that...
In which case he really didn't win, but whatever.
I think that they were definitely trying to manipulate the election with the defunding of the police by creating chaos, because they understand that, to quote Mr. Obama, elections have consequences, one of which being the president's ability to pick Supreme Court justices. But they're trying to even go around that consequence. This is a piece from Reuters. White House Commission on Supreme Court Reforms sees risks in expanding court. Washington, October 14th, Reuters. A White House commission studying potential changes to the U.S. Supreme Court said expanding the number of justices would pose considerable risks and might further politicize the court, according to preliminary draft documents released on Thursday. Just for those that don't remember, Joe Biden formed this White House Commission on Supreme Court reform to explore the possibility of expanding the size of the court so that they can pack it with liberal justices, just FYI. Back to the article. Members of the commission formed by President Joe Biden appeared more positive about the benefits of imposing term limits and staggering appointments out over time, but they noted it might not be possible to make such a change without amending the U.S. Constitution. The documents are to be used as a source of debate by members of the commission who are holding a meeting on Friday, which would be today, and will prepare a report for Biden and turn it over to him by mid-November. Biden signed an executive order in April creating the 36-member bipartisan commission in response to calls from the left for seats to be added in order to counteract the 6-3 conservative majority on the nation's highest court. Many Democrats were angered by Republican former President Donald Trump's success in filling 3 vacancies, including one that Republicans who controlled the Senate refused to fill when Democrat Barack Obama was president. The commission noted that adding seats would clearly be lawful, but said that the risks of court expansion are considerable, including that it could undermine the very goal of some of its proponents of restoring the court's legitimacy. It said that, rather than calm the controversy surrounding the Supreme Court, expansion could further degrade the confirmation process, adding that a future Senate could respond by refusing to confirm any nominee. While the discussion materials noted that commissioners were divided on the merits and justification of expanding the court, they said that advocacy groups, a cross-ideological group of Supreme Court lawyers, academics, and others preferred the idea of term limits for the justices, who currently have lifetime appointments. Among the proposals for reforming the Supreme Court, term limits for Supreme Court justices appear to enjoy the most widespread and bipartisan support, one document said. Term limits would advance our Constitution's commitments to checks and balances and popular sovereignty by allowing each president to appoint 2 justices per 4-year term. That can enhance the court's legitimacy in the eyes of the public because appointments will appear fairer, less arbitrary, and more predictable, the draft materials said. But the question remains how term limits can be implemented, as that might require an amendment to the Constitution. Members of the commission are divided about whether Congress has the power under the Constitution to create the equivalent of term limits by statute, one document said. It is significantly more difficult to amend the Constitution than it is for Congress to enact legislation. Why don't they just get the ATF to make a ruling? Then it'll be all right then. The materials noted that the United States is the only major constitutional democracy in the world that has neither a retirement age nor a fixed term of years for its high court justices. So, I think that's an interesting result, that the possibility exists that instead of expanding the court in order to pack the seat with lifetime appointees, they're considering somehow trying to change it so that justices have term limits, and that every president, every 4 years, 2 go out, 2 more come in. What do you guys think of the merits of any approach, or should we just leave it the hell alone and go with things the way they are?
At this point, in my honest opinion, I think we should have term limits because we got so many bad people that are literally overdoing their stay in Congress and everywhere you go. There's another issue. You got people like AOC and the squad as well that are also in power. I mean, anybody that's new can also be just as bad as coming in. So I don't know, but I do agree with you. Need term limits on this point.
Oh, you're not agreeing with me because I haven't made stated a position one way or the other. Just to clarify.
But no, as far as the topic in hand, I just agree with the topic itself. Squib, what's your thoughts on this?
I've always been in favor of term limits. I don't like the idea of a lifetime appointment. I definitely don't like the fact that the citizens can't recall every elected or appointed government employee, period. I think everybody who gets a check from the government, whether they're at the local level or all the way up to the federal level, if there's enough people in the jurisdiction that they have power in, so, take it from the city all the way up to the county, to the state, to the entire country, if there's enough confirmed signatures on a petition, then I think there should be a way to recall that person, to include a Supreme Court justice. So if they don't want to do term limits, then if enough of us are mad about it and they can certify that our signatures are legit, you're out. Bye. See ya. That's for anybody. These people need to be afraid for their jobs. I think their jobs should be something that you don't take these jobs. You don't take these jobs for just petty reasons. You want your name in it. You start off wanting to make a difference in whatever it is, but they should be afraid for their jobs every single day they go into. And if you say, well, that's no way to go into work, well, welcome to the private sector. But these people are protected. So if there aren't term limits, then I say some sort of easy recall situation.
One thing that I don't know, and if someone out there does, please let me know. If you know and you're watching this on replay, sound off in the comments. If it does require a constitutional amendment to change these things, I don't think it requires a constitutional amendment to expand the court, because I know that's been done before. I could be wrong, though. It might. I don't know. But I definitely don't know if imposing term limits and setting up a mechanism whereby, every 4 years, every 8 years, whatever, a president can appoint two new justices. I don't know. I don't know if that would take a constitutional amendment. I haven't thought about the subject enough to know and the ramifications of it enough to really have a clear position on this. I don't know enough to know if I'm for it or against it. So, because this is important. This is the structure of our country, of our governance. We're supposed to rest on these 3 legs: the executive, the judicial, and the legislative. And, what happens to a 3-legged stool if one of them legs is too short? The whole fucking thing falls over. So I'm leery of changing things because of that without a lot of study. Because this, we all know that the Supreme Court can affect everything, our entire lives, our entire lifestyle, our everything in our country. For instance, go to our next El Topico. For those of you who don't know, there's a case in front of the Supreme Court set to have oral arguments next month that could potentially have staggering impacts as relates to the Second Amendment. What I'm talking about, what I'm talking about is this case that this article talks about by Lee Williams in Ammoland. Supreme Court 2A case will make gun carry legal everywhere in U.S. Well, first of all, I think that headline shouldn't be making a prediction like that because it may or it may not. Can the government stop you from carrying a concealed handgun in public? That's the question before the United States Supreme Court in New York State Rifle and Pistol Association v. Bruin. Whether the Second Amendment allows the government to prohibit ordinary law-abiding citizens from carrying handguns outside the home for self-defense. As the petitioners pointed out in their petition for writ of certiorari, perhaps the single most important unresolved Second Amendment question before this court's landmark decisions in District of Columbia v. Heller and McDonald v. City of Chicago is whether the Second Amendment secures the individual right to bear arms for self-defense where confrontations often occur, outside the home. Petitioners argued that the text, history, and tradition of the Second Amendment do indeed secure this right. On its face, this is a simple case. New York has a handgun licensing system for more than 100 years. Nowadays, New York prohibits its citizens from carrying a handgun outside of their home without a license, and it requires license applicants to convince a licensing officer that they have proper cause to carry a concealed firearm. In reality, unless they're a celebrity, judge, or other VIP, nearly all license applications are denied. In his license request, petitioner Robert Nash cited a string of recent robberies in his neighborhood and the fact that he had recently completed an advanced firearm safety training course. The licensing officer denied Nash's request, saying he failed to show proper cause. Petitioner Brendan Koch said he applied for a license to allow him to carry a firearm for self-defense. Koch, too, cited a bevy of training courses he had taken in support of his license request. The same licensing officer denied Koch's request, stating that he failed to show proper cause to carry a firearm in public for the purpose of self-defense because he did not demonstrate a special need for self-defense that distinguished him from the general public. The district court summarized, Nash and Koch do not satisfy the proper cause requirements because they do not face any special or unique danger to life. Nash and Koch argued that the New York law violated their constitutional right to bear arms. The Second Amendment Foundation filed an amicus brief in this case, joined by a dozen state firearms associations. The brief lays out the history of why concealed carry is a core Second Amendment right. Scores of other pro-gun rights groups also filed friend-of-the-court briefs. These groups are optimistic about this case. Otherwise, they argue, the court's conservative majority would not have agreed to hear the case. But what would a victory look like? Second Amendment Foundation founder and Executive Vice President Alan M. Gottlieb said if the petitioners are victorious, there could be several likely outcomes: good, better, best, and outstanding. I believe this law will be overturned. I believe we're going to win. The question is how big we win, Gottlieb explained. Lower than good, Gottlieb said, would be if the court finds the law unconstitutional, but that it applies only to the individual plaintiffs and they send directions for New York to follow. That would be the lowest form of victory. A better victory, he said, would be if the court finds the New York law unconstitutional facially, unconstitutional on its face. 8 other states have similar show cause laws: California, Hawaii, Rhode Island, Maryland, Delaware, Massachusetts, and New Jersey. All of their laws would be impacted by such a decision. But we'd really like the court to go further than that and go to a shall-issue law, one that says if the applicant is not a prohibited individual, the government shall issue a license, because the good cause requirement is unconstitutional and doesn't work, Gottlieb said. Even better would be if they require a standard of review of heightened scrutiny, like strict scrutiny, because carrying a firearm outside the home is a core Second Amendment right. This scrutiny, Gottlieb said, would put the burden on the government to show why they shouldn't be allowed to infringe upon a right. Why they should be allowed to infringe upon a right, It would require the government to show a court why lower levels of scrutiny couldn't solve a potential public interest without infringing upon a constitutional right. Of course, they could expand our Second Amendment rights, which would affect other rights, not just carry laws, Gottlieb said, but that's unlikely since Chief Justice Roberts likes narrow decisions. Whatever the outcome, New York State Rifle and Pistol Association v. Bruin is destined to become a landmark Second Amendment case. The U.S. Supreme Court is scheduled to hear oral arguments on November 3rd. I would add that depends entirely upon New York State and New York City not going along the route that they've been allowed to do and just simply issuing these guys concealed carry permits so that they moot the case. Because I could see that happening right quick, because I suspect that on the face of things, the state would lose this one. But I agree with Mr. Gottlieb that the real question lies in how narrowly the court's going to rule. What do you guys think?
You want me to go first or Squib?
Someone speak. I don't care.
All right. As far as New York is concerned, I mean, I think New York needs is just to really to stop the endless corruption and sneaky dwindling wherever they're doing. I mean, honestly, they've been case by case. They've been trying to hide stuff under the bus multiple times. New York needs to let its citizens have that right, in my opinion.
Squib, do you have any opinion on this?
I don't ever have a good opinion when it involves the Supreme Court. I just don't think they're doing their job. So I got nothing, I guess.
I just see outright corruption in that state, man, within the city itself.
Yeah.
New York has the problems it has for the same reasons other places have the problems they have. They asked for it, they got it.
You get the government you vote for, right?
Well, sometimes you get the government you don't vote for, but yeah.
Yeah, I think we already had this discussion tonight.
Yeah, like keep normalizing corruption.
Where am I at in the show? Oh, okay. I know where I'm at now. Well, I think that I'm holding out hope that SCOTUS is going to make the right decision here, because saying that you don't have a right to carry a firearm outside your home for self-defense and no other reason is absolute stupidity. Speaking of absolute stupidity...
And now prepare yourself for another tale of stupidity in this episode of Moron of the Week.
In today's episode of Moron of the Week is President of North American Arms. This is her column that she does. This is the October Soapbox. Similar message, different language. Sandy's Soapbox from 2021. I can't describe the shock I felt when I did my daily audit of our message board and found the very new, very active thread which arose from a soapbox that had been posted over a month earlier. You'll have seen the number of comments which were left below the original post, 4. Add to those the direct emails I received, 5, and I thought that soapbox had probably been overlooked by just about everyone, as I often feel. Usually my soapboxes don't deserve much comment. The current thread suggests otherwise in this case. I'm very sorry about some of the things I said, and not at all sorry about most others. Oh, this is a retraction. This isn't the... Oh, see? Now this is not the original, this is a retraction and an apology of the soapbox that she did before. But you know what? She's not going to get away with that bullshit because someone else saved it to in case they did exactly this. So let's go to the gun feed for what she actually wrote. This is from the September 2021 soapbox. I believe in vaccinations, so should you. So this is what this was written by Sandy Chisholm, owner and president of North American Arms. I've chosen to republish this as editorial here, word for word, in case they decide to take it down after the backlash ensues. Here's the original. So she did say this. September 2021 soapbox. I believe in vaccinations, so should you. Posted on August 30th, 2021. Just when you thought the end of this life-threatening COVID pandemic was in sight, it's become painfully clear that it is not. In fact, we're heading in the wrong direction. What makes this realization even more painful is that, notwithstanding our missteps regarding wearing masks, social distancing, economic shutdowns, and the like, the end could have been in sight. If only more of us had embraced the simple protocol of getting vaccinated, we'd be well on our way to leaving this scourge in our wake. Instead, we're back smack in the middle of it, and life as we knew it is still a distant dream. I continue to believe in vaccinations. I believe that they are far and away the most effective means of protecting oneself from contracting the COVID virus and is the key to eliminating the ongoing threat of the virus and its increasing and more threatening variants worldwide. I also believe that if a vaccinated person does contract the virus, he, she, they will suffer far fewer and less severe symptoms than those that are not vaccinated. Is there any doubt? Well, yeah, because a vaccination is supposed to prevent a disease, not pre-treat a disease. But, you know, if you ask the CDC, they went ahead and changed the definition so that it makes the severity less. But I digress. Over the past few months, my thoughts about those who don't believe in the value of vaccinations has transitioned from disinterest to sympathy to incredulity to contempt. I believe that those who don't take advantage of the opportunities to become vaccinated are ignorant, misguided, and or selfish, or any combination of the three. Despite all the unarguable reasons in favor of getting vaccinated, there remains a surprisingly large number of people who stubbornly refuse to do so. Why? There seems to be a variety of excuses that are preferred, almost none of which hold any validity. I offer some of the more popular ones in no particular order. I don't believe the vaccines are safe. How much data gathered over what period of time will it take to put this false narrative to bed? I don't believe the vaccines are effective. While there have been some few instances of people contracting COVID, that's a fucking lie because there have been a lot of instances of people contracting COVID after getting a vaccine. But I digress. The effects they suffer are, almost without exception, an order of magnitude less severe than they would have been otherwise. I've already contracted the disease, and so I already have some level of immunity and see no benefit from vaccination. Right on the first count, wrong on the second. You can be certain that your immunity will only be bolstered with the vaccination. I'm afraid of suffering side effects from the vaccination. While some have reported this to be the case, there are stunningly few, and the effects are modest/weak and very short-lived. My circumstance puts me at a heightened risk from being vaccinated. I don't know what circumstance that is. It mostly certainly does not apply to those attempting to become pregnant, for example. I have a history of adverse allergic reactions. Maybe. This alone has a taint of legitimacy. Well, Sandy, I'm glad I have you there to decide what's legitimate and what isn't. I claim a religious exemption. For the life of me, I can't understand the basis of such a thing. What religion would advocate against something that will protect your life and that of others? Certainly none that I've ever heard of. Go ask the Pope. I can't afford it. Bullshit. It's free. I don't know where to find it. Are you living under a rock? I'm a freedom-loving American, and I simply don't want to. Ah, here we go. This is far and away the most frequent and lamest excuse. Even Donald Trump, the poster child for the selfish exercise of frequently nonsensical individual freedoms, I'm not wearing a mask because I don't want to, has been vaccinated and has encouraged other people to do so as well. He's also previously contracted the disease above. As a member of a society, you have an obligation not to threaten the health and well-being of others, particularly when doing so comes at no risk or expense to you. I'll admit I enjoy no small measure of schadenfreude, reading stories of those stubborn... Schadenfreude means taking enjoyment in other people's misery, by the way. It's a German term. Of those stubborn people who find themselves stricken and on death's door, suffering from their earlier foolish decision not to get vaccinated. I look at it almost as a Darwinian effect, helping cleanse our gene pool. Cleanse our gene pool, folks. Excuse my lack of sympathy. Too bad. Completely avoidable. Didn't have to happen. I know that this is one of my more controversial and likely to be one of my least popular rants. I take this personally. There are individuals in my own family who are the subject of my heretofore silent disdain, as well as several other friends, as well as people on my team at NAA, people who I otherwise respect and whose company enjoy. Not so much so now. I acknowledge that it's your decision to make, but I'll admit I don't have much regard for those who lack any sense or moral obligation to the greater community, and to their own friends and loved ones whose health and safety they so cavalierly threaten. Please get vaccinated. The life you save may well be your own or mine. Please feel welcome to share your reaction with me, Sandy at NorthAmericanArms.com. Well, Sandy, I can tell you one company's firearms I will never be purchasing, and that's North American Arms. Because you know what? I happen to feel that if Americans don't want to do something, they shouldn't be forced to just because you are afraid that something might happen. So, Sandy is contestant 1 in Moron of the Week.
I second that, Budget. Your decision to vote with your wallet, and I got a bounce. So I'm going to go ahead and vote in advance. I'm going to put in my absentee ballot for this bimbo.
Okay.
Thanks. See you guys around the interwebs.
You have a good one, Squib.
Later.
Next up are these parents in New Jersey. This is a piece from Bearing Arms. New Jersey parents freaking over gun store opening near school, from October 14th by Tom Knighton. If your kids walk to school, I understand there being some concern over certain businesses being in close proximity to those schools. Bars and liquor stores, for example, might correspond to drunk driving, and if they're close to the school, a kid might be injured or killed by such a driver, as just one example. With something like a liquor store, the problems can also take the form of Junior paying someone to go in and buy alcohol for them. That's how a lot of my peers got beer back in the day. Yeah, me too. Yet in New Jersey, some parents are upset over a completely different business opening up. There's a debate in a New Jersey community after a gun store opened near an elementary school. To be clear, this isn't a question about whether the gun shop is legal. The owner went through all the proper channels to open. It's more a question some parents are raising about optics and what's really best for a school community. If you want to make moms and dads feel more comfortable in uncertain and often scary times, opening a gun shop a few hundred feet from where several hundred young children attend school might not be the way to go. Overall, I think it's a terrible idea, parent David Miller told CBS 2's Jessica Layton. Miller said he wonders what the council and Mayor Mark Zinna were thinking, allowing a building full of weapons on the same block as his two kids' elementary school in Tenafly? Hell if I know how to pronounce that. I don't think it's a great idea. I think the kids need an environment of safety. This is not an issue of rights. It's just a proximity issue, Miller said. No, it's not a proximity issue because there's absolutely no correlation between gun stores and violence. I know it can be difficult for anti-Second Amendment types in an anti-Second Amendment state to grasp, but the existence of a gun store in an area doesn't lead to violence. And really, why would it? Gun stores don't sell guns to children. They don't sell them to people who can't pass a NICS check either. Those people don't go out in the parking lot, load up the gun, and just start shooting up the neighborhood either. Seriously, this is a non-issue that a bunch of snowflake parents who are quivering in their boots over the fact that guns exist and their precious child might be within 5 miles of someone who has one that isn't a police officer. If they were really concerned, they might have considered arming themselves with some statistics to bring to the fight. Of course, if they had, they'd have seen there aren't any supporting any claim they're making. That's because it's not a proximity issue, as Miller claims. It's simply the fact that people are going to be able to conduct a lawful activity with no associated risk to the community, and these parents just can't deal with it. Well, they should get over themselves for a change and recognize that the world doesn't revolve around them and their panty-wetting phobias about the private ownership of firearms. Well said, sir. Well said. So New Jersey nitwits or maybe it's New Jersey Numbskulls. You are the next contestants in Moron of the Week. So let's go ahead and slap this poll out here. Who's the Moron of the Week? The New Jersey Nitwits, North American Arms Knucklehead, or President Sniffy? Because, he always has a place in our polls. Who do you think, Warsaw, who deserves the moniker of Moron of the Week? Or is Warsaw even here? Did everybody drop out? They left me all alone. Squib left. Warsaw left. Stinking, Calaveras 32 special left. Everybody abandoned me. Well, you guys are still out there in the chat, so you let me know who should be Moron of the Week. Should it be the New Jersey Nitwits, the North American Arms Knucklehead, or Joe Biden? So far in the poll, we got the North American Arms Knucklehead, Sandy Vagina, and President Sniffy. Oh, nope. New Jersey Nitwits, NAA Knucklehead, and President Sniffy. President Sniffy is actually winning. We only have 4 votes out there. 5 votes. President Sniffy gets another one. EDC Texan says, well, they just lost money for me. I'm assuming North American Arms. Phantom Fate Entertainment is like the guns are hanging outside the store shooting themselves at bystanders. Phantom Fate voted for North American. EDC voted for North American. Right now, President Sniffy is winning with 56% of the vote. New Jersey and North American are tied with 22%. Warsaw voted for President Sniffy. Looks like President Sniffy just might win this one, folks. Are we actually going to have that? President Sniffy legitimately winning President Sniffy legitimately winning an election? I mean, not that he exactly wants to win this one, but hey. 50% of the vote, President Sniffy. 30% New Jersey Nitwits. 20% North American Arms Knucklehead. Wow, it's something that people love you so much, Joe, that you can be winning Moron of the Week when you haven't specifically done anything this week. Other than, exist. Joe Biden going once. Uncle Touchy going twice. Sold! President Sniffy is the Moron of the Week.
And there we had another tale of stupidity in this week's episode of
Moron of the Week.
All right, folks, those of you who've been here for a while or are not new know that we are at what is the last segment of the show. We are at Roll Call 219's favorite segments, self-defense shoutouts. Self-defense shoutouts are not where I am reveling in the proposition that the bad guy won the room temperature challenge by taking a dirt nap. It is where I'm instead reveling in the proposition that the good guy had the means, method, and opportunity to keep the bad guy from making him do the same. First up is this piece from WUSA9.com. Man shoots, kills alleged intruder who broke into his Montgomery County home, police say. This is from October 11th. A homeowner shot and killed a man he said allegedly tried to break into his home in Poolesville, Maryland, according to Montgomery County Police Department. The incident happened in the 18,000 block of River Road Monday morning, police said. Shara Goff, a public information officer with Montgomery County Police Department, told WUSA 9 that the homeowner claims he heard sounds in his home and went to investigate. They said the homeowner was on the phone with dispatchers when several rounds were heard fired through the phone. When officers arrived at the scene, they found an adult man dead inside one of the rooms in the home. At this time, the investigators are trying to figure out why the alleged intruder targeted this specific home. It remains unclear how the alleged intruder entered the home in the first place, but police believe it was an isolated incident. The homeowner is at police headquarters speaking with investigators. Police say they're familiar with the home and that there's a shooting range inside. There's a sign outside warning people about the shooting range. There's also a sign saying birds aren't real, which experts say refers to a strange internet meme or conspiracy theory that the CIA killed President Kennedy because he refused to replace birds with drones. The identity of a deceased man is unknown at this time. Well, I gotta say, this is a case of stupid is as stupid does, because I'm sure as shit not breaking into a house that says shooting range inside and birds aren't real. So, yeah. I gotta wonder what that fella's mental state was. Next up is from WHIO.com. Homeowner shoots man after home invasion in Perry Township. Suspect booked into Montgomery County Jail from October 14th. A man wanted for breaking into a Perry Township house during a home invasion has been booked into jail on preliminary felony charges. Dave Adams, 41, was shot by the homeowners and later located miles away, according to Perry Township Police. Adams, who was arrested at Miami Valley Hospital around 1:30 p.m. October 13th, is being detained at the Montgomery County Jail on charges of aggravated burglary and 2 counts of felonious assault. Officers were first called to reports of a burglary in progress at a home in the 5800 block of South Diamond Mill Road around 5 a.m. Tuesday. The suspect, who was only identified as a man, broke into the house and began assaulting the homeowners, said Perry Township Public Information Officer Brian Douglas. During the altercation, one of the homeowners, who was also not identified, got a handgun and shot the intruder, Douglas said. The suspect, later identified as Adams, then jumped into a car and drove away from the scene. The homeowner, Raymond Isaacs, told News Center 7 he was asleep in his bed when he heard the intruder attack his wife and started to attack him. He hit me probably 25-30 times, Isaacs said. He was on my back and I reached around and shot him and he went running. I shot again as he was leaving. Isaacs said the intruder made an odd and false accusation that he was responsible for raping the intruder's brother. He broke in through the dog door, and then he was saying something about raping his brother. I don't know what the hell he was doing, Isaacs said in a 911 call to dispatchers obtained by News Center 7 in a public records request. Around 7 a.m., police located the man naked and suffering from a gunshot wound in the area of Old Dayton Road and North Lutheran Church Road, which is about 6 miles south of the incident on Diamond Mill Road. Both the suspect was transported to an area hospital for treatment, but Douglas said his condition was not known. Both Isaacs and his wife were also transported to area hospitals for observations. Police do not believe the suspect in the home invasion knew the homeowners. Next up, last but most certainly not least, is from Fox6Now.com. Milwaukee attempted robbery shooting, caught on camera, victim speaks. A shootout during an attempted robbery on Milwaukee's north side was captured on camera. Fox 6 News spoke to the 39-year-old man who was shot twice during an incident on Sunday, October 10th. The victim, who asked not to be identified, said he just got home Sunday night when he and his girlfriend were met by men with guns near 48th and Hampton. He had a gun too. It's disheartening for me and for anybody in the community, the victim said. I don't hurt nobody. I didn't do anything to nobody. It's been very traumatizing. The victim said the trouble began when they got home. An armed suspect came out of nowhere, he said. I automatically reached inside the car, pointed my gun to his head. I saw that he had the gun pointed to my girlfriend's head, said the victim. I said, if I shoot him, he's going to shoot her. The victim went around the car, saw another suspect, and started shooting. He said he just happened to be wearing a bulletproof vest that night. You don't just happen to be wearing a bulletproof vest. You made a conscious decision to put one on, and he explains why. He says, by me being over on 48th and Hampton, it's a very dangerous area, the victim said. I feel like I'm in a war zone. At the point, I'm going to protect myself. After the girlfriend was briefly taken away from the car, surveillance shows her walking with her arms up. At this point, of course, I'm going to think I'm targeted. They were in the bushes before I even pulled up, said the victim. The Milwaukee Police Department said the circumstances that led to the shooting appear to be robbery related. Let's go ahead and watch some video. I may have to mute an advertisement before we get to it, though, so be prepared. Yep, I'm going to go ahead and mute that advertisement. So, yeah. Because, advertisements, they suck. Unless they're advertisements that I'm getting paid for, in which case they're awesome.
Fox 6 exclusive, a shootout during an attempted robbery, all captured on camera.
Aaron Mabin spoke with the man who was shot twice during that incident on Sunday.
Surveillance video shows a shootout near 48th and Hampton Sunday night.
It's disheartening for me and for, anybody in the community.
This 39-year-old victim didn't want his identity shown, but does want his story shared.
I don't hurt nobody. I don't do anything to nobody. It's been very, traumatizing.
He says the trouble began when he and his girlfriend arrived home and a suspect with a gun came out of nowhere.
I automatically reached inside the car and put the gun pointed to his head. But I seen that he had the gun pointed to her head with the trigger. So I said, if I shoot him, he gonna shoot her.
He went around the vehicle, saw another suspect, and started shooting. The victim is seen wearing a bulletproop vest. He says he regularly wears one.
By me being over on 48th and Hampton, it's a very dangerous area. I feel like, I'm in a war zone. So at the point, I'm going to protect myself.
After his girlfriend was briefly taken away from the vehicle, surveillance shows her walking with her arms up.
So at this point, of course, I'm going to think I'm targeted. They was in the bushes before I even pulled up.
Milwaukee police say the circumstances leading up to the shooting appear to be robbery related. The victim, who says he does not have a concealed carry license, was shot twice and believes he wounded one of the suspects.
I do believe the people will get caught.
The victim tells Aaron he isn't sure why he was targeted.
I know what strikes me about this is that this gentleman, and I'm going to use that term loosely, appears to have got in his little gunfight and then ran away, leaving his girl to the tender mercies of the bad guys who, thankfully, just let her go. But regardless of whether or not that guy showed the most stunning bit of heroism ever seen, he did use a firearm to defend himself from two disgustingly horrific attackers. And if you notice, it looked like he had an extended magazine, so maybe there's a case to be made for the use of the extendo, right? So, on that note, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. I want to thank my esteemed panel for being here. Calaveras 32 Special. Go check his stuff out. We had Night Strike 1 in here earlier. Go check his stuff out. Of course, the lovable and irascible Squibload. He will tell you, do not go check his stuff out. He doesn't want you to watch his videos. But I do anyway. And then we had Warsaw Patriot on the panel as well. I want to thank all of them for being here. I want to thank all of you for being out there in the chat, both old faces and new. I appreciate you spending the time with us on this Friday evening when you could have been doing absolutely anything, and yet here you are. Make sure that, particularly with regards to their plans to possibly change the makeup of the Supreme Court, that you let your Congress critters and elected representatives know what you think. Send them a snail mail, email, telephone, telegraph, carrier pigeons, bicycle messenger, smoke signals, semaphore, anything that you have to do to let them know what you think, and never, ever, ever give up the fight. I'll see you guys on the next one.